Welcome, McGill Health Professional Learners. My name is Lara Heimann. I'm a physical therapist and creator of the Lit Yoga Method. And I have been in the clinic just like you guys are. And I'm just giving you an on-rotation flow. So this can be done when you're got some time, but you're still in the clinic, you've got a chair around, how to move in some ways to kind of unkink the stuff that gets stuck from sitting or standing in one position or whatever you're doing in one position a lot. So this is just a short little sequence, but you can apply this anytime you have a chair. All right, so first, sitting in a chair, think about how you're sitting. You don't want to be too far forward and pitching the pelvis, but if you're slumped back, that's also not great for the black fascia or the low back. So sit on the sit bones, hinge at the hips, and just try and lean your belly on your thigh. And then you can let your head release. And this is just a nice way of letting all this back fascia that goes down and connects to your glutes and hamstrings, let it open up a little bit. And breathe like this for a few breaths. Your hands can be on the floor if you have a chair and are able to get them, but depending on how high your chair is. Breathe into the back and exhale. And let the head go too, because a lot of that tightness we get from having our head off center and forward, this tightness comes in the suboccipital region. So letting the head dangle is really nice. And you can stay there for as long as you want, but I'm just giving you some ideas of what you can do. This is something you definitely should do. And rotate here. So you're on rotation, rotate your neck a little bit, and then slide up. So the other thing we want to do is open up the front line of the body. Using a chair is really nice for this. If your chair has handles on the side, or arms on the side, you can put your hands on there, or you can even put them on the seat if you don't. Obviously, don't do this on a wheelchair. So your feet are on the floor, your hands can be on the seat or on the arms, and then you lift your hips like you're doing a bridge, like we've done in some of the other classes. Look down, don't let the head drop, but lift your hips. Don't let the ribs pop up. So hold there and get that feeling of work in your arms, work in your legs, and then you can lower and do this about 8 or 9 times. If you're feeling crunchy in your low back at all, it's better to be a little bit higher on the armchair and then lift, and don't try and move the hips as far forward, but tip the pelvis in posterior tip so that keeps that low back long. But you can add some extension in there if that feels good for you. So doing this, lifting, warming up your legs, warming up your glutes, warming up your arms, keeping the arms centered, not dropping forward. And you can do it down here for more. This is more hip extension for sure, because you just have a shorter lever than on the chair, arms. Working the glutes. And then holding up there, firming the glutes a lot. And then we'll come back down and come to the edge of your chair. Slide your hands to your knees. Unweight some of the weight and get it into your hands, and then hover your hips off the chair. This is going to look funny if you have a lot of people around, but just, you can't worry about that. And lower. So we're unweighting and lifting, but we're doing this from the hip hinge. So it's lifting and floating. You don't want to come. So it's the opposite of the hip extension you were just doing. You're staying in flexion, working the hip flexion, working the quads, working the core by keeping the spine long. Lift, come back down, lift, come back down, load and lift, come back down. One more time, you'll lift off. And when you lower and hover, oh my gosh, this is the good stuff. Lower and hover. You still are giving yourself support in the front here. Hover, hover, hover. You want to feel the glutes, hamstrings light up here. Of course, the quads are. Hugging the belly in. This is like a downhill skiing move. And then we'll combine that, what we were just doing on the chair, and drive the hips way up, working the glutes. Slide your hands down. Get into that hover position. Slide the hands up, drive the hips forward. 2 more like that. Slide the hands down to the knees, go low, hover, hover. You could even have competitions with your coworkers. And then come up. Doesn't take much to really get these big joints moving and the muscles around them firing. Hug your belly in so you're not arching in the back. Hover, and then drive the hips forward. Great, and then come around. Hands will come onto this seat of the chair. Doesn't matter if it's mushy or firm, but again, we can't be rolling here. And bend the knees, the spine is long. We're going to take the left leg and bring it behind you, so it's pointing, and then lift it off the floor. So getting into hip extension there, and the right knee has a bit of a bend. So they're doing two different things. The hands are on the floor, on the chair, and the right hip has some flexion. The left hip has extension. This is pretty challenging. If you want to make it a little bit more challenging, you can bring the right arm up and over the chair. So the left foot is tapping and coming down. The right hip is flexing. The right arm is reaching, and really working the core here. A few more. So wake your butt up very quickly, and then we'll bring the hands underneath your shoulders, switch legs. Right foot slides back, you have a bend in the left knee, flexing in the hip, belly's in, and then begin to lift and lower the right hip. So remember, when you're lifting and lowering the hip, you don't tip in the pelvis. The low back doesn't change. The option again, to left arm can come over the back of the chair, hug your belly in. And if you have a higher chair, that's okay. You can do all of this stuff on a higher chair. You might need to bend your elbow. So you want your spine staying straight, but it doesn't have to be at all on the horizontal plane. Last time, we'll bring that foot there, and then the hands stay on the chair, bend the knees a lot, and just do a tiny cat-cow to kind of mobilize the spine and mobilize the ribs and mobilize the scapula along the ribs, tipping in the pelvis, just freeing that up. And last time. Now we're going to take your and if you have a handle, or what are these called? Arms. This can be in the way. If you don't have an arm, this is a lot easier, because we're going to try and sit like this. Sit one of our butt cheeks on, and if I didn't have that there, I could get more of my thigh on there, but it's okay. I've got my butt cheek on there. Just be careful that you don't fall over. So I'm just using the chair here as a way of, I can pretend like I'm writing my notes, but I'm getting a great opening for this left hip and using the belly to hold the spine. So I'm working the opening of the hip flexors of the back leg. I can add a bit to this, a small turn inward. So I'm the left leg is back, I'll slightly turn toward this right. Just a small turn, keeping the pelvis, only to add to that. And then we'll switch. So now the left butt cheek stays more on it. The right leg is back. Ooh, this side really needs it. Bend the right knee as needed. Take all the junk out of the low back by hugging the belly in. This feels nice. I have a little support on that left butt cheek, and then I can turn just slightly toward the left to open up the front of the right hip. So we're really trying to get space in these hip flexors. Hip flexors pull our pelvis into anterior tilt, and that can really lead to a whole host of problems. So this is something you can do right in the chair anytime you feel like it. Adding that small turn. This feels really nice. I don't want to leave this, but I want to give you some other things to do. Okay, so coming back, we're going to go through those one more time. Hands here or on the chair, depending on how much room you have and how lift and lower. Working the hips, working the arms. This time we're going to hold the hips. We can add a little bit of tricep dip. Just tiny bends in the elbows. So we're working full body. Who would think we're at work? Hug your belly in. This can take just 10 minutes, little break time. And then the last time, you'll lower the hips. Walk your feet back a little bit. Hinge forward like you're going to lay your belly on your thigh and hover the hips. And then come back down. Hover. You can have the hands on the thighs or the knees. Maybe you can have your hands on your belly just to give it support. Hover. This is also great for the ankle. Ankle dorsiflexion is really needed for good mechanics of the hips and protection of the knee. Last time, we're going to come all the way up, drive the hips in extension, feel that, Sit way back down, but hover your glutes off. Come up, drive the hips, come back down, hover, and drive the hips. Slide down and hover. Remember, you can have a little competition who can hover for the longest with the neutral spine, not arching. Hug here, hold the belly in. Good, and then come all the way up, turn, hands on the chair, knees are bent, slide your left leg back. The right arm can immediately come over as you start to pulse that left hip. So we're doing a lot of work at the hip, obviously, because that is what's going to help us feel more awake and keep the mobility in the body. We need these big joints like the synovial joints of the hip to stay mobile. And then last time pulsing, switch. So we've already done this once. We're doing it the second time here. Right leg back, left knee's bent, and pulse. Pulse the right leg. Watch what your head does. Hold your front ribs in and not tipping in the pelvis. Keep this left hip in flexion. Pulse that right hip. Good. Both feet come down. Hands are on here, and we'll cat-cow just a few times, mobilizing in the spine, the pelvis, the shoulder blades. Inhale. Exhale, and then inhale, and then exhale. And then we'll turn. So we have the, the right leg forward, right butt cheek on the chair, left leg behind. Big breath in, and you can add that turn to the right. You really don't want to use levers to pull you in a twist because that's too vulnerable for the ribs and the spine. So use your core strength, but work that glute. You can use your hands to help hold you there or get elongated, but not to pull you more. And then we'll turn, left butt cheek on the chair, right hip in extension, right knees bent, and then turn here toward the left, helping that open. So keeping the spine long. And come around to the back of the chair. One more little sequence here. So again, we want to mobilize the hips, but that's going to help the whole body. So just side to side, hip abduction. So use the hands on the back of the chair to help keep you extended. So it's funny, sometimes I'll just do this when I'm on a phone call, but mobilizing in hip abduction and not letting the pelvis swing around can bring a lot of energy into the hips. So it's a small movement. One leg is swinging in hip abduction. The other leg is stabilizing with the same muscle. So gluteus medius will move that into hip abduction, but also will stabilize it. Now we're going to combine some movements here. So first try stepping back like a lunge. The left knee is bent, you're on your right toes, and then stepping that forward, and then stepping back with the left toes and forward. And as you do that, just feel like you're not tipping at all in the pelvis or in the spine. You're staying like you could balance something on your top of the head. We're going to combine these. So this is like a little brain teaser. So the right hip goes into hip abduction. You step it down. The left toes step back. Then the left foot steps in, and it goes into hip abduction. And then the right foot steps back. The right foot steps in, and it goes into hip abduction, steps down. The left foot steps back. The left foot steps in and goes into hip abduction, and then steps down, right foot back. So just keep alternating those. This is really easy to get into. And again, have a conversation with somebody or be thinking about your notes. It's a good brain teaser, hip abduction of the right, step back with the left foot hip abduction, step down, right foot back. And right foot hips, left foot back. One more time, out, and then step back. Good, then adding on to this, so the right hip will go into hip abduction. The left hip goes back, hold here. So we're just holding this position, low belly's in. And then we'll turn and rotate the ribs to the right. So again, opening, we don't have the chair that we're leaning on, but we're having the chair that helps us stay lifted. Then we'll step that left foot in. Left hip abducts, and it crosses behind the right, so cross-ankled, and then the left arm comes over. Okay, then we uncross. Right foot steps back. We twist to the left, keeping the right glute on. And then the right hip goes into abduction, crosses behind. Left arm goes over. Uncross, left foot back. Twist to the right. Bring it in, lift hip abduction, bring it behind. Right arm comes up and over. Uncross. Right foot steps back. Twist to the left. Keep the right glute on. Step it in, right hip abduction, bring it behind, and left arm over. Tailbone stays down, so we're just opening up some of the side stuff there. Very good. So that's like a little routine. I already feel like super warm and yummy in the hips. You can do any part of that. Obviously, some of it will be easier to do when you're alone versus when a lot of people are around. But the point is, on rotation, keep moving. Keep the big joints moving because they stay mobile. All the tissues around them will stay more pliable as well. Thank you so much.